The Dallas Stars have been hanging around as one of the NHL's premier teams for a while now, but they only have one Stanley Cup final appearance under this core. Is this finally going to be the year where Dallas can get out of the Western Conference? This is the 2025-26 Deep Dive on the Dallas Stars. Hello and welcome to team number 2 on my preseason power rankings. Now again, the rankings didn't change post Alexander Barkov injury, so just if you're wondering if that was a factor in this, they weren't. I did the rankings pre that injury, and by the time I had gotten far enough into this, that came out. So that's like whatever. I'll talk about that more in the Florida video because obviously Florida's number 1. But the Dallas Stars are in such a unique position right now because I feel like their division is tough, right? Like we've talked about how the kind of middle of the Central is very tight. But Dallas seems to be this team that is flawed for sure, and we'll get into some of those flaws because I think that there is issues with this team. But a lot of the good parts of this team can outweigh that, right? And I think especially post Mikko Rantanen trade last year, a lot of people, including myself, and I talked about it on the podcast, really felt like this was the year that the Stars could kind of break through because the blue line was bad, but they had this firepower up front, and it really felt like that would be able to outweigh the defensive deficiencies, and it certainly did for 2 rounds. I mean, like Mikko Rantanen himself was like the far and away Conn Smythe favorite after round 2, and then really fell off in the Oilers series, and even near the end of the Jets series, but mostly in the Edmonton series. And Dallas really couldn't keep up at that point. Like their offense just really wasn't coming out. Their other big players weren't performing to an exceptional level. Like Mikael Granlund was probably their second best forward throughout the playoffs in terms of consistency. And obviously he's gone now, and the Stars really didn't do a ton to patch up anything, right? They weren't a big move team this summer. There was a lot of talk about Jason Robertson potentially getting moved. That didn't happen, but Mason Marchment's gone, Mikael Granlund's gone. Not huge losses for the team themselves. I mean, like obviously Mikael Granlund wasn't there until the trade deadline, but it's a team that it still has flaws, right? Like this blue line is still has issues behind their top 3 guys. And it's an offensive core that I still think is really good, but the depth is going to have to be overtaken by some of these young players that have been kind of kicking around, like the Wyatt Johnsons and Maverick Borks, who have looked really good in moments, but really need to establish themselves as true top 6 level players, because then they can kind of take over the Ben and Sagan spots on this team. But as we go through this roster, 2nd in offense, 8th in defense, 4th in goaltending, 7th in special teams, and 8th in coaching culture, we're really splitting hairs for a lot of the issues here in Dallas. And that's the thing that I think is really interesting about the NHL right now is, and this is something that didn't really exist during like the Blackhawks era of being the best team in the NHL, where like you could pick Chicago every year and be like, yeah, okay, they're gonna go on and win here, right? But like my number 2 team in the NHL right now, right, is only 2nd in one category, right? Like they're not top 3 in anything else for me at the moment. And I think that's fascinating. Now, I think with the Alexander Barkov injury, and again, if you've been following at home, Florida was my number 1 offense. Obviously, the Barkov injury would move Florida down. So, Dallas is number 1 there. But, and then, we can talk about, special teams and stuff without Barkov, but it's besides the point. It's really interesting to see an NHL right now where there really isn't, one team that's just dominant in every category, right? And I think that's what makes it interesting, which is why I've kind of done it in these groupings throughout this series. If you've been kind of following along to that, where I have like kind of their contender status throughout the year and their season outlook, and it's kind of been grouping them into these different buckets. And the Stars are clearly, like, I think they're the best team in the West right now until one of Vegas or Edmonton can knock them off that this season. But I think that all 3 of those teams are very flawed, and it really does set up a very interesting potential run here with those 3 teams, and maybe somebody else in the West that comes out. But those are certainly the three that I have my eyes on in the Western Conference, and the Stars right now, for my money, are the best of those three, and I think it's largely because of this offense, right? Like, even with the loss of Mikael Granlund, this is still a team that, is going to have a full year of Mikko Rantanen now, who's, one of the top 5 best wingers in the NHL. I think Jake Ottinger is an amazing goaltender, and he showed that certainly in the playoffs, again, up until the Oilers series, where everything kind of just fell apart for the Stars. But the big question for me, especially from a contender standpoint, is the blue line. Now, obviously, I have them 8th, so, like, we're splitting hairs here, right? This isn't, a bottom 10 defense in the NHL. But you look at the depth of this blue line, and we'll get into it, but, like, behind what they have in, Miro Heiskanen and Esa Lindell and Thomas Harley, it really does leave a lot to be desired. And we saw that when Miro Heiskanen went out with an injury at the end of last season, where the blue line really just wasn't good. And I think that it's a concern, and it's something they haven't addressed yet. And I'm interested to see. Like, I believe that'll be the area, at a deadline, for instance, that the Stars will want to adjust. But outside of that, and even then, I mean, the top 3 on this blue line, if healthy, are all really, really good. And so I don't see a massive issue there in terms of, potential drop-off. But overall, like, the Stars are very good in terms of what they can do in net, and obviously the offense is going to be exceptional. And, we look at the coaching culture, right? That's where we're going to start off here. And Jim Nill is there, and I think Jim Nill's done a really solid job. Again, for me, like, the rating at this point is just he hasn't been able to really get over the hump aside from the COVID year, in terms of, building a true, Stanley Cup team that, has gotten to a Stanley Cup. Glenn Gulutzan was an interesting hire for me. It did seem like, Pete DeBoer's time there was over, especially after his comments about Jake Ottinger, but I don't love this hire. I think that there were better candidates out there. I mean, like, I've said this whole series, I'm not going to criticize the team's decision. If there wasn't a better option in my mind, Jay Woodcroft would have been the clear pick here. But maybe some time away from the head coaching position here will turn Glenn Gulutzan into something. Obviously, he has the time in Edmonton. We'll see. Again, like, he was doing, special teams for the Oilers, and I don't know how much coaching that first line power play needs in Edmonton, because you have the superstars that they have. Hey, whatever. I mean, maybe, I wasn't in there for the interview, so I don't know what the situation is there, but I mean, certainly this team's still a contender. I don't think that Glenn Gulutzan's going to do anything to, like, sabotage where this team is, but I don't think that he's I don't know. I don't think that he's the guy to necessarily, like, raise the ceiling for what this team can be. Let's put it that way. Maybe I can be proven wrong, but as of now, he gets the typical C-. I need to see it first rating. We look at their numbers last year, and the numbers last year were solid, right? I think that, defensively, in terms of their expected goals against, that's definitely the one that stands out, and obviously 13th in actual goals against is a bit of an issue. And I don't know if that necessarily is going to get better, right? Now, obviously, a healthy Miro Heiskanen for the season will help with that. In terms of the offense, though, I mean, goals for 5th, expected goals for 6th. Evolving Hockey is pretty much in the same ballpark there. That's going to only, like, I think that he's either going to be stable or it's going to get slightly better with a full season of Mikko Rantanen, right? Like, I don't see that moving in much, but it really is going to be the defensiveness, right? Like, 22nd in expected goals against for a team that is, looking to be this good in terms of, winning a Stanley Cup. That's an issue, right? That's a big hole for me. And goaltending can be what it is, but you're still 13th in goals against, 8th in goals share, 13th in expected goals share. Those numbers need to get better, right? If this team is going to, want to win a Stanley Cup, those numbers do need to be better. In terms of the special teams, 17th in power play percentage, their expected numbers on the power play last year were fantastic. They just couldn't score. Again, a full season of Mikko Rantanen should just bring that back up. And the penalty kill numbers were solid. Their expected numbers on the penalty kill weren't great, but they have a solid goaltender in terms of his penalty kill numbers, and I think that they'll be fine in that category. Like, if anything, the power play will take a big jump up, and the penalty kill might drop down a little bit. So it'll even out in terms of their overall special teams numbers there. So we jump into this offense, and truly this is, a phenomenal offensive group here. You have Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, and Mikko Rantanen. Hintz obviously had a down season last year. So did Jason Robertson, really up until the second half. I think he really turned it around post All-Star or Four Nations break. And obviously they have Mikko Rantanen, who's one of the best overall players in the NHL, certainly one of the best wingers in the NHL. It's a top group that I think is really strong. I think one of the things that isn't being talked about a ton is the middle six for Dallas, which I think last year looked a heck of a lot better with the Mikael Granlund, Mason Marchment additions in here. But Jamie Benn, Matt Duchene, and Tyler Seguin, or a solid second line, right? But I think Benn and Seguin at this point worry me a little bit. Jamie Benn's been kind of on a decline. Matt Duchene's still a really, really solid second line center. But even then, it's an old group, and I think this is what I mean when I say that the young guys on this team need to take those next steps. Guys like Wyatt Johnston and Maverick Bourque need to really fully establish themselves as top six players. Wyatt Johnston certainly is already in that conversation. Maverick Bourque, I need to see it for another year before I fully buy into that. But overall, I do think that there's enough potential here for this team to not have an issue. But with Benn, Duchene, and Seguin all being up there in age, the Stars really need to hope that next wave of players can step up as soon as this season. Obviously Wyatt Johnston I think is already there for the most part, but I need to see top six potential out of Maverick Bourque still. And then the fourth line is pretty solid. Sam Steele I think is a really strong fourth liner. Radek Faksa had a solid season last year, and Colin Blackwell is he's fine as your 12th forward. So we start with Mikko Rantanen, and I mean Mikko Rantanen was such a strange. He had such a weird season last year because rarely do you see a player play for three teams period over the course of a season, but you never see it for a player who's traded twice and is as good as Mikko Rantanen is, right? Obviously he started off in Colorado where he looked like typical Mikko Rantanen. Then he went to Carolina, and Carolina's system just really didn't fit what Mikko Rantanen was. And frankly, he didn't have enough time to mesh into the system, right? He started looking better as his time there went on, but he also just wasn't he didn't have the time to fully integrate himself into the system. And 13 games is clearly not enough time. I think that if he would have been more willing to re-sign in Carolina, then they would have just kept him and got it to work eventually, because it did start to look like it was starting to click there. But then he went to Dallas, and then everything really clicked in Dallas. I think that's when we really saw the full true potential of what a Mikko Rantanen could look like in a system other than Colorado. And his numbers really popped off from there. I mean, but offensively, Mikko Rantanen's going to be phenomenal. He's also really good in transition in terms of his zone entries and retrievals and exits. It's something that he's been very good at forever. Defensively, he's nothing special, but offensively, he just kind of does everything that you'd want from him, and he did really fit, perfectly into Dallas. We saw him in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. He was just an absolute steamroller. He almost single-handedly got the Stars to the third round, which is crazy to say, because really the rest of the Stars last year were kind of disappointing. Jason Robinson didn't have a great playoff. Rupe Hintz didn't have a fantastic playoff. Miro Heiskanen was hurt for most of it. So I can see a world where if you can get kind of the potential that we expect out of everybody else in Dallas, plus Mikko Rantanen being a Conn Smythe winner, the Stars are easily a Stanley Cup contender. They're easily one of the favorites for sure. I have them second right now. I don't think that's a hot take, but it really is it was a disappointing year last year, because they had that potential last year as well, and it just nobody else showed up for the playoffs besides Mikko Rantanen for the entirety of the thing, and even he had a rough third round. But certainly the Stars are going to be a team that are going to rely obviously on Mikko Rantanen, but they really need support from the rest of their players, and Jason Robertson being one of them. And now Jason Robertson last year, the start wasn't great, but his post All-Star break especially, he really turned it around, right? He's an underrated two-way player. I think people don't give him enough credit for what he can do defensively, and it really is a huge impact in terms of his overall value to the team. Offensively, obviously Jason Robertson's great. People talk a lot about his skating, but it hasn't really affected him a ton. Again, start of last year aside, his weird skating isn't that big of an issue. People freaked out about it in the draft. He dropped, obviously, and I think if anybody can go back now, he's getting drafted significantly higher. But defensively, his defensive IQ is actually pretty good, and it does help this top six, which kind of lacks that strong defensive presence in it. And Jason Robertson's been able to supply that. I mean, his power play numbers are also really good. His finishing is among the best in the league. His playmaking is among the best in the league, and he's doing against really strong competition. Like I really don't know why Jason Robertson was even being thrown around at all in trade conversations, unless he doesn't want to re-sign. But like the fact that the conversation was let's move Jason Robertson so we can re-sign Mikael Granlund was kind of ridiculous to me, because Jason Robertson's one of the best players in the league, and if he is truly available still, teams should be lining up for him, because he could be a potential franchise-changing winger for plenty of teams in the NHL. So from a Stars perspective, like I would make sure you get him locked down like now. And hey, I mean, if he ends up being on the market, that's a hell of a pickup for anybody who wants to take a swing at him. And he's somebody that I would be really, really looking to keep around for a long time in Dallas. Roope Hintz is interesting, because last year I was really bullish on Roope Hintz. I thought he was going to be a breakout candidate in terms of like national recognition. And then he just kind of struggled for a good portion of the season. Now, he did start to figure it out later in the year, but as well as Jason Robertson. But like I don't want to say fall off, but like his decline last season was fairly substantial throughout the first half of the year. And I still think that he's a first line center. I still think that he can be the first line center on a Stanley Cup team, obviously. But I don't know. Like, it was really kind of telling, the fact that like Jason Robertson started off slow and then Roope Hintz also did. It feels a lot like Jason Robertson was like the real primary guy on that line, more so than I kind of thought that he was. Like, I always thought that Jason Robertson was a better overall player, but it was just kind of like Jason Robertson started off slow, so now Roope Hintz is now all of a sudden starting slow as well. And maybe it's just correlation. I don't know if there's actually anything there, but it took me by surprise that Roope Hintz was that poor to start the season. And poor, like, I mean, he was fine, but like in terms of like where I had him last year, I was a little disappointed in what he looked like. He needs to really, like, he doesn't need to be like an Alex Barkov. That's not what I'm saying, but like he needs to bounce back from last year, because it was again, like, he ended the season strong. His underlying numbers weren't bad, but in terms of being a number one center on a Stanley Cup team, I was just kind of disappointed what I saw from Roope Hintz last year. And maybe a full year, another full year, especially playing with Mikko Rantanen, is going to help. I can't imagine why it would hurt. But he's somebody that I'm really watching for, because like I talk about X factors a lot in this series, and I don't know if I'd quite label Roope Hintz an X factor, because I think like if he stinks, then like Dallas is in trouble. But in terms of like a breakout from Roope Hintz could be like the difference between the Stars winning a Stanley Cup and losing in the second or third round. I do kind of believe that, because I know kind of what I'm going to get from Mikko Rantanen, and I'm pretty sure I know what I'm going to get from Jason Robertson. Like, Hintz is the one that I need to see him get back to where he was like a couple years ago. Matt Duchene is one of my favorite like underrated depth contracts in the league. He's 34 going on 35, but like his offensive production is still phenomenal. His power play numbers are still phenomenal. In terms of like an offensive second line center, like I don't know if there's like a better budget player on the market. Like obviously like Leon Draisaitl as your second line center is better, but like in terms of like contract value, I don't know if there's anybody better than Matt Duchene, at least as of like the last 2 years. And it's funny, because he was always kind of the guy in Colorado back in the day, but he really has kind of gotten this, like, it's very Joe Pavelski like, right? Where Joe Pavelski kind of got this second wind when he went to Dallas, and we're seeing that in Matt Duchene too. And obviously Pavelski wasn't able to, get his Stanley Cup. Matt Duchene would be a great story if he could get there. And he's just somebody that I've really liked. Like, I think that his play style, his ability to generate offense, to still be a really shifty player, even like at his age, and just create opportunities for himself, is something you don't see a lot. Claude Giroux kind of had that a bit up until like last year and 2 years ago. And the thing I worry about though is that if I guess it's not even a worry, because like if he does drop off, like Wyatt Johnson's there, and I think Wyatt Johnson's good enough to be the 2C on this team now. And until the wheels fall off Matt Duchene, he's such a unique player to have in this lineup, and I think that he has a ton of value to what the Stars are doing, and I'm sure Stars fans can attest to the fact that like Matt Duchene is this super underrated spark plug player on the second line that really doesn't get a ton of recognition because of the Stars playing ahead of him, and I think that Duchene should get a lot more love for who he is at this point. Jamie Benn is a fascinating one, because for even going into last season, Jamie Benn was somebody that I was super high on. I was like, this guy's great. He's got this he's still a high end power forward. Nobody really talks about him because his contract stinks. But he's 34 years old at the time. Looked like a player that was super underrated. And then last year he just kind of hit a cliff too. And I mean, his defensive numbers have never been good, but his finishing just tanked last year. His overall production kind of fell off. And I'm really, I don't know if he can he's not going to get back to where he was 2 years ago at this point, because it's just the age curve has hit him, and it'd be very, very hard for that to happen. But I wonder if there would be something. It's hard for me to now buy into Jamie Benn bouncing back, because he is 35, right? That's hard to do at that age, right? And I think, especially as a more power forward type player, right? The physicality takes a toll on you. He doesn't have the best hands. He doesn't have the best he's not the most skilled forward. So his number one thing right now is his offensive creation, and his passing is still there, but I don't know what to expect from Jamie Benn going into his age 35 season. I don't know what kind of player we're going to get, and if we can get a top six winger who can be kind of that gritty power forward type player that he's been, then that's great. But I really don't know what we're going to see out of Jamie Benn this year, and it does concern me a little bit, because obviously that's a top six forward on this team. So again, this is kind of where the Maverick Bork thing comes in, where obviously Maverick Bork's not going to be the power forward guy, but if one of Benn or Seguin drop off, and we're going to talk about Tyler Seguin in a second here, I can throw him up. They're both kind of in the same boat here, whereas Tyler Seguin I think has still got a ton of that potential still there. His defensive numbers last year were great; they shot up, and his finishing the last 2 years has been really good. I think there's still a lot more runway with what Tyler Seguin is than there was with Jamie Benn, and I don't think I would have said that 12 months ago. You can go back to my Dallas Stars review, where I was very high on what Jamie Benn was, and I wasn't as confident in what Tyler Seguin was, mostly because of the injuries. But I think now, there's more, unless there's another major injury to Tyler Seguin, I think that the runway for what Seguin is at this point is longer than it is for Jamie Benn, and that's kind of surprising to me, because again, I sold my Tyler Seguin stock probably a year and a half ago. And Jamie Benn was somebody that I was kind of riding with, and he had his numbers really backed it up. And then last year he just tanked. And I think that one of these two guys needs to still be a top six level forward on this team, or else they're going to have a hole there. And when you're running into a Vegas, or even at Edmonton in the third round, or even Colorado, to a lesser extent, Colorado's depth is an issue. I talked about that in their video, but you really need to be able to go like shot for shot with those teams, top six wise. And if one of these players can stay up there and the other one can fall down to like a third liner, and Maverick Bourque can step up or Wyatt Johnston can step up, then they'll be fine. But I worry if both these players decline, and for Bennett's continue to decline, and for Seguin it's just hit that cliff, then I think there could potentially be a hole in this lineup, and they could kind of be trying to fix that on the fly, and that could be something that holds up the Stars getting to a Stanley Cup victory. So that's the area here in the forward core, at least, that I'm watching out for, because I think the depth on this team is solid, but I don't know how many other depth players could actually step up and be full-time second liners right now. One of those players is Maverick Bourque, who hasn't put up exceptional offensive numbers yet, and that's kind of what's holding me back from seeing him as a true top six level type player. His defensive numbers, though, have been very good. Now, they've been against, they haven't been against the craziest competition, but I think that his defensive ability is what makes him like perfect for that third line role. And I think ideally that's where the Stars want him to play, or at least in terms of like minutes. And I think if Bourque can evolve his offense and become a better, creator, and a better finisher, then, and he's above average in terms of his finishing ability, but as a creator, I just think that that's where I need to see the next step from him before I can believe that he's a second line forward in the NHL. And if that happens, and if it happens this year, then the Stars are going to be fine. Because I think that somebody like Wyatt Johnston already has that in him, but Maverick Bourque's just kind of the wild card for this team. He's my X factor. If you want an X factor for the Stars, if he can kind of develop into that next wave of offensive production, then the Stars will be fine. But if not, that's where we could see potential hole in this lineup. And even then, if Bourque can stay on the third line and be a defensive forward, that's perfect, right? Like his penalty kill numbers are fine. He doesn't play a ton shorthanded, but he's on the fringe of that second unit. His numbers there have been fine. His power play numbers are a little underwhelming, but it's just getting that next level of offense out of him is really going to be a big difference maker for me in believing in Maverick Bourque taking that next step. And finally, you have Wyatt Johnston, who I really like. I think that his numbers have looked really good. I mean, especially for how young he is. I mean, 21 years old. It's crazy. He's obviously locked up to that $8.4 million deal for another 5 years. I think that's going to be a fantastic contract. Defensively, he's been fairly mediocre. He had a down year last year. His offensive numbers have been rising year over year. His finishing ability has been pretty stable. He plays power play and penalty kills, pretty good in both of those areas. Great goal scorer, good primary assist guy, and he's doing it against high-end competition. He's playing somewhat of a first line role last year, especially pre Mikko Rantanen. Wyatt Johnston is somebody that I believe in as that guy who can step up into the top six, right? Like, I think that it's just a matter of owning that role full time, and I wouldn't be surprised if even by December we're talking about him being the full-time second-line center on this team, and then, Duchesne or one of the other guys drops down to the third line. I could very much see that being the case. And Wyatt Johnston is just it's crazy how the Stars just find these guys, right? And they've been drafting late, or at least later than a lot of the teams that are rebuilding. And, I'm sure plenty of teams in the NHL would love to have a Rupe Hintz and a Jason Robertson and a Wyatt Johnston and a Maverick Bourque. None of these guys were insanely high picks in the draft. And I don't know, Wyatt Johnston's not a franchise changing forward. But in terms of being, a very, very good complementary piece, he certainly already is that. And he's such a fun player. I think that's the best way to put it. His skill set is just so much fun. And, he's locked up now for quite a while. Obviously, by the time his contract comes up, the salary cap's going to be $400 million or whatever the NHL thinks it's going to be in 4 years. But but like he is somebody that could step up into that second group that we were looking at, and overtake one of those older players and kind of move up into this next. The runway here for Dallas is still pretty big, right? Because like Mikko Rantanen's in his prime, Robertson and Hintz are still pretty young. Wyatt Johnson's obviously super young. There's still, Heiskan's not super old yet. Thomas Harley's still young. Jake Ottinger's like kind of in his prime. There's still a lot of runway here for the Stars. Like I don't think it's time to hit the panic button in Dallas. Like even if they don't break through this year, I think you start asking questions if they don't break through this year. But depending on obviously how they exit the playoffs. But in terms of like what the runway is for this team, there's still quite a bit of room because of players like Wyatt Johnson, and I think that is something to be excited about if you're a Stars fan. We look at this blue line, and this is where my biggest concern comes in, because you have, Esa Lindell, I think, is just underrated at this point. His contract has actually aged pretty well for a player that I thought was overpaid at the time, but the cap has shot up now, so things are a bit different. You have Miro Heiskanen, who is a phenomenal two-way defender, and then you have Thomas Harley, who I think really made his mark last year. I think that of every single player that played in the Four Nations, I don't think anybody's stock rose higher because of that tournament than Thomas Harley. Right? Maybe you could say Jacob Slavin, just because I think Slavin is like the best overall defenseman in that tournament, but people know that Jacob Slavin's like good, right? Like people in hockey, right? To me, Thomas Harley, like coming in, not being on the team, not even being able to practice, finding out like the day of the game if you're going to play or not, and coming in and being, one of Canada's best defensemen, not just like good, but like he was one of Canada's best defensemen in that tournament, was such a massive stock raiser for what Thomas Harley is. And I do really think that he's now like propelled himself to superstardom. He is for sure a lock for Team Canada's roster, in my opinion. I think especially just because based on the fact that he like went out of his way to go to camp, or to go to Four Nations and give up his holiday for a chance to play, really makes me think that they're going to reward him with an Olympic spot. But like, I just think that he should be on the team. Like he's great. But like, and so that like the top three on this blue line is fine. Like I think that they fit really, really well. Miro Heiskanen rocks. Thomas Harley is one of the best number twos in the league. And Esa Lindell's a very good shutdown defenseman. The rest of this blue line is where I have concerns, right? Like Liam Vishal is, a fringe NHL defenseman. Nils Lundqvist is a fringe NHL defenseman, and Ilya Lyubushkin is a fringe NHL defenseman. And the problem with that, right? If one of those guys was on this team and they had two more like full-time NHL players that like I consider full-time NHL players ahead of them, sure, right? Like if Ilya Lyubushkin was your sixth defenseman and you had, a couple guys, like you had one guy that's like an 80 overall in my ratings and one guy's like a 79 or something, like fine. That's a solid, might be one of the best blue lines in the NHL. But the fact that like you are one more Miro Heiskanen injury away from Ilya Lyubushkin being your number 3 defenseman, like it's insane. Like I hated that contract when it happened. I did not like that. I don't know how Ilya Lyubushkin, for instance, and I'm picking on Ilya Lyubushkin here, but like Nils Lundqvist and Liam Vishal aren't anything special either. But Lyubushkin specifically is this guy that they handed out this contract to that just. And Matt Dumba last year too, like you can throw him in this conversation as well, where it was so out of touch with what this team needed. And like there's like, again, like I'm not going to rip on a team if there wasn't better options available, but there were so many better options available, right? Like I talked about in the Pittsburgh video, like Parker Wotherspoon signed for nothing. He would have been perfect as the number 4 guy here in Dallas. Like I love Parker Wotherspoon. I think his defensive ability is fantastic. Like that's just one example, right? There's plenty of defensemen that you could have went after here that just would have been a better option than this. Like Jordan Harris was available. Like I like Jordan Harris. You could have thrown him on a third line. They're like, these are guys that are cheap, right? Like it doesn't like, I don't want the cap excuse. There's always cheap defensemen to sign every single year that are so much better than the guys this team has. And it's just, it really is hurt. Like now again, if everybody's healthy, Harley, Lindell, and Miro Heiskanen can carry this blue line. I fully believe in that. But it's just like that's such a gamble to take, especially after Miro Heiskanen just had this major injury. Now I'm not saying it's going to recur, but like somebody else could get hurt, right? Like it's just you're banking on like injury. You're hoping that the NHL just turns the injury slider off on franchise mode this year, and it's just. Because I really believe this blue line is one injury away from being, like, that's how bad the back half of this blue line is. It's like they miss one of these guys. Like, even if it's Lundell, I think the wheels could fall off this blue line very, very easily, and it was very easy to fix it, and Dallas just didn't do it. And that gives me pause to believing that this team is like, that could be the reason why this team fails. Like, the offense, I believe, I nitpick the offense a bit, but like the blue line for me this is the biggest issue on the team. And I'm coming again. I had them like 8th in the NHL. It's a good blue line. It's a good blue line because of the top 3 guys. But like, we're talking about trying to win a Stanley Cup here. Right? This isn't about being just a good blue line. This is about being the best team in the NHL. And when you have a glaring hole this big in terms of contenders, I'm going to talk about it. So that's the issue there. But we jump into this blue line. Miro Heiskanen rocks. He is awesome. He's super young now. He's somebody that grew on me. He's somebody that I was lower on, 3 years ago. I think that he was a bit overrated at that point. But then he started to actually develop into the player that everybody thought that he was. And he is now like clearly one of the best defensemen in the NHL. He's awesome. He's great in both ends of the ice. His power play numbers are fantastic. He draws a lot of penalties, and that's something that I think is underrated in terms of his ability. He plays against crazy competition. He doesn't finish particularly well as a defenseman. He's also not like a super elite playmaker, but he's good like in transition. He's very good in transition. He's very good at like creating his own opportunities. And I think that there is next levels that could come here. Like, I think him becoming a better finisher from the blue line is something that I would key in on at this point. But like, again, like, he's a defenseman. That's not like a huge deal that he can't like score at a crazy rate. So I'm curious to see kind of what the next step of Miro Heiskanen looks like heading into the prime of his career. But I'm super excited about it. Obviously, he signed, the 8.5 deal for another 4 seasons. It's a great contract for what he is. He's going to get paid a handsome sum of money when those 4 years are up. But, for the Stars here, they're getting, a crazy surplus value out of that deal. Miro Heiskanen is one of the best defensemen in the league now. And like I talked about, man, I mean, Thomas Harley is also in that category. He is incredible as a defense, and he really just kind of broke onto the scene last year, especially. But as a transition zone entry, like out of his own zone into the offensive zone player, he is fantastic in that sense. Now, I don't think that he's like Shea Theodore level, who we talked about in the Vegas video, because Shea Theodore is like maybe the best transition defenseman in the NHL, but Thomas Harley could easily grow into being like that next type of player. And like, when you look at it from like a Team Canada perspective, that's awesome. I think that's great in that sense. But that's really where Thomas Harley's value comes in. His defensive numbers are also really good. He's solid at denying zone entries, but his reads in the defensive zone are also really good. He's very good at getting into those lanes, not allowing those high danger scoring chances against. I think that his defense at the blue line could be improved, but again, like, he's young. Like, there's a lot of growth here, right? Like, these are nitpicks. But especially as like a number 2 guy, the fact that he doesn't have the pressure of being a number 1 is also very good for him. And again, when Miro Heiskanen got hurt, like Thomas Harley, that's where the real true breakout for Harley happened. Was he had to step up and be the number 1 on a really, really flawed blue line at that point. And he did a fantastic job at it. So I think him having another year of being a number 2 and being having a bunch of years being a number 2, because assuming Miro Heiskanen is going to be here for a long time, it really is going to allow Harley, I think, to flourish without the full pressure of having to, carry a blue line. And that's something that I think a lot of young defensemen miss out on. And I think it's hurt some of them in some sense. Like, I think if like Detroit, for instance, had a number 1 guy ahead of Mort Seider would look better right now. But that's besides the point. Red Wings fans can come for me, but like, you saw it with Jake Sanderson, right? Like, Jake Sanderson was the number 2 and 3 on that Senators blue line, and now he is their best defenseman, and it took some time to develop into it, but having that safety net ahead of you really helped him. And I think that Miro Heiskanen is obviously going to help Thomas Harley, just based on the fact that Miro Heiskanen is going to be the guy that gets tapped most of the time, and that's going to help Harley's development overall. But Thomas Harley, I love him. I'm expecting a big year from him as well. And finally, we have Esa Lindell, who is kind of the defensive rock on this blue line, and always has been, but his numbers have just
gotten better like as he's gone on, especially like his offensive production has actually taken a step up. Again, like I don't love the shutdown. Nothing happens when they're on the ice defenseman, but as your number 3, being paid what he is, it's a reasonable deal. And he does have, like, he has added an offensive component to his game now. So S. Lindell has grown on me in that sense because of that, right? I think that if he was just still the super low event, nothing happens when he's on the ice, he'd be fine. But again, as number 3, like it's fine. It's something that the blue line desperately needs because, like, again, the rest of the blue line is pretty brutal. So in that sense, like, I do really like what S. Lindell can bring to this team as, just a defensive rock, somebody who's put up decent, pretty good shorthanded numbers as well. And just having that presence on this blue line, it's good. Again, I'd like to see another step up in his offensive game. I don't think that's going to happen at this point, but if he just kind of repeats what he did last year, like as a number 3, it's a very, very good value for what the Stars have overall. And finally, we talk about Ilya Lyubushkin, right? And like 3.3 million for another 2 years is ridiculous. It's an insane contract, right? Like it's one of those deals where it's like, I picture what the Dallas Stars could have done this. Like they could have literally went out and got $3 million a year defenseman and patched up the bottom half of this lineup, and it would have been significantly better than paying Ilya Lyubushkin $3.3 million. Like you had $1.1 million a year, tax free, by the way. Everybody loves talking about that you could have paid to 3 defensemen who are getting paid less than $1.1 million. Like, I guarantee you, I could go through it, and maybe I will. Like, go follow me on Instagram at NBA Hockey, and maybe I'll do this, as I'll go through and be like, here are 3 guys that Stars could have signed over the last 2 seasons, right? I'll do last year, too, because he was signed last season. And just, that would be better for 1.1 or less than what they're getting currently on their cap, right? And they wouldn't be getting paid more in Dallas because they're tax-free, so you can fight me on that. And I guarantee you I could build a significantly better bottom 3 guys on this team than what they have with the Ilya Lyubushkin money alone, right? That's not counting the money they paid to Matt Dumba, and that's not like, it's just, that's really that's holding me back from Jim Nill too, is just the fact that this was a contract that they decided would be a good idea. And I just like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't understand at the time. He's never put in, like, it's not like Ilya Lyubushkin used to be good, right? Like there was never this time where he was like a strong, like, top end defenseman, and it's just people love the name value. Like he's always been a bad defenseman, and teams just consistently give, like, it's just, I don't get it. It's like he's the Tanner Jeannot of forwards for me, where it's just like Tanner Jeannot consistently gets these crazy contracts that just make no sense. And Ilya Lyubushkin's in that boat. It was an awful contract at the time. There's so many better ways to spend money, and I know what you're thinking. You're like, well, he's just a third pair defenseman, right? But it's like, look at their blue line right now. Like, you're trying to win a Stanley Cup. Like, how many deals did the Florida Panthers have? And you can't even get at me with the Florida Panthers with the tax thing, because Dallas is a good team that doesn't have tax either. So stuff it. But how many of these contracts? Now, again, like, we can argue about the contracts that Florida just handed out to players in terms of term. But on the last 2 seasons in their cup windows, how many contracts do the Florida Panthers have that are equivalently as bad as Ilya Lyubushkin's? The answer is 0. And there's a reason for that, because they're just smarter with their money. And I could be harping on this too much, but the fact that you could have 3 defensemen who could make this blue line so much better for just Ilya Lyubushkin's money, not to mention the money you're paying the other 2, which isn't much, but it's still, like, it helps, right? It's an extra, almost $2 million. That's just, it all adds up. And when you're in a salary cap league, you can't be recklessly spending money, and this was a reckless contract. And it's one of the few that Jim Nill's handed out, but it's there, and it's enough, in my mind, to be a legitimate reason why the Stars have yet to win a Stanley Cup. Like, I do believe that if their blue line was better last season, they might have been able to get by Edmonton. And maybe that'll be a reason for them to falter in the playoffs this year. So I could be harping on it a little bit, but there's reason for that, right? It's like, just, there's better players available, and there's better ways to spend your money than $3.3 million for 3 seasons for Ilya Lyubushkin. It just doesn't make sense. talk about the goalies, and this is a good unit here. Casey DeSmith is a fantastic backup. He's a really strong. He's always been a really strong backup. I've been a Casey DeSmith fan for a while. But Jake Ottinger obviously is one of the best starters in the NHL. He proved that in the playoffs last year. He significantly outdueled Connor Hellebuyck in the playoffs. He had some trouble against the Oilers, but a lot of goalies have trouble against the Oilers. There's no big shame in that. But for me, like, it's just, if Jake Ottinger can be Jake Ottinger, this unit is fine. Like, there's not a ton to add to that. I just like that's it, right? If Jake Ottinger can be a top 5 goalie in the NHL, when it matters in the postseason, the Stars will be fine in net. Like, it's a pretty simple explanation there, but I think it's about all you need for what the Stars are. And finally, we jump into the special teams unit. Like I said, like, I think the power play has enough potential here to bounce back. Like, it's a good enough unit in terms of its overall talent. You have guys like, you're gonna have a full year of Mikko Rantanen on this power play. You're gonna have a full year of Wyatt Johnson developing, full year of Miro Heiskanen, who was missing for a good portion of it. Matt Duchene's still on. Thomas Harley's still here. There's a ton to like about this power play. I can't see it struggling the same way it did. Their underlying numbers were so good last year. That's just how it is. And then the penalty kill, again, like, the chances against are going to be there, but Jake Ottinger might be the best penalty kill goalie in the NHL, so it does counteract a lot of those issues. Even if they do regress a bit in terms of like the amount of goals they allow, the power play, first of all, will just be better in my mind. So the special teams units should even out there, and you have kind of the ultimate equalizer in terms of Jake Ottinger just being a fantastic goalie, special teams, and he's certainly like the primary reason for why their penalty kill percentage was so high last season. All right, and there you go. That is the deep dive on the Dallas Stars. We have one video to go. Obviously, it's on the Florida Panthers, which is probably not where I'd have them based on the news that we got with Alexander Barkov. But again, these rankings were solidified in the middle of July, so there's not much I can do about that. But anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like. Let me know what you think of the Dallas Stars and who you think's going to win the Western Conference, because we're done with the West now. So if you think the Stars are going to be the team representing them, if you think it's going to be Vegas, Edmonton, or somebody else, maybe you think it's going to be San Jose, let me know in the comments down below. But we'll see you for the final video, which will be out before the season starts. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.